Hello everybody, my name is FMJ and welcome back to a brand new video. Now today we're going to be going over the 10.0.5 WindWalker Mythic Plus guide. I'm going to try to record this in one swoop and then kind of edit in some parts and some thoughts as I think of them while editing. So let's just hop right into it. So a little bit of a background about me. I've been a WindWalker main since the start of Shadowlands. Near the end of BFA is when I swapped fully to WindWalker. I played Brewmaster a little bit in Season 1 and Season 2 Shadowlands, and then I kind of made that full swap in Season 3 and went for the title push. I didn't really play in Season 4, but I came back for Dragonflight, and so far, I've been enjoying it pretty well. WindWalker Monk is kind of in like a pretty unique state right now. It's still an S tier class, however, depending on the dungeon and the affixes, there are a few other classes that will get taken over us. These classes include Shadow Priest, Outlaw or Sub-Rogue, Enhanced Shaman, Boomkin, and sometimes in certain situations you'll see a Frost Mage or an Arcane Mage. But if you're looking to push title range, if you're trying to just get that title, push some 20s, get all 20s time for your portal, then this class and spec is more than enough to time those. So I guess the first thing that we can start going over is the changes from Shadowlands to Dragonflight. There's not a whole lot of changes in terms of buttons, but there are a lot of cool talents that we get now, and a few more group-wide utility that we get, such as Avoidance and additional healing. Pretty much the main new button that we get is Summon White Tiger Statue, and some builds don't even use this. I like it for the AoE, the pulsing damage. It's pretty useful in certain keys, such as like Court of Stars when you're doing imps, or like Nokud when you have a lot of mobs. And outside that, some of the general changes is, instead of having to pick between Dampen Harm and Diffuse, or like Fort Brew and all that stuff, it's all just baseline now in the spec. So the amount of defensives that you have is utterly insane. You're going to have Karma, you're going to have Fort Brew, Dampen Harm, Diffuse Magic, you're going to have your Health Pot, your Health Stone. There's like no reason you should really die to like boss or add damage output unless you're missing kicks or failing mechanics. Outside of that, most builds are still playing Bone Dust Brew. Skyreach, which was a legendary back in Shadowlands, has now made a return and is kind of baseline for most specs. Depending on what you want to do. It's kind of hard to tune and roll around in with dungeons because you'll just Skyreach into a swirly or into a frontal or something, so it's really hard to get used to. The other pretty large change is we do not use Whirling Dragon Punch in literally any spec. As much as I like the filler ability, it's just not something feasible right now. It's not really something that we're doing. And then obviously you see Feline Stomp, that's more geared towards single target and raid damage, so we can completely ignore that side. Another pretty important change is we used to break our mastery stacks during cooldowns, so we could spam Spinning Crane Kick. However, that is no longer the case. In no situations, ever, like in cooldowns, out of cooldowns, single target, multi-target, whatever it is, you will not be breaking that mastery stack. And outside that, those are kind of really the core changes to WindWalker Monk, then Shadowlands. We get this utility, 8% healing. You also get this utility for avoidance. You can either take one or two depending on the build you're doing, and it kind of depends on like the key as well. So anyways, that's kind of like the basis of the changes that WindWalker Monk undertook since the start of the expansion. What we can do now is we can kind of just hop into the two main builds that Windwalkers are doing. The two main builds kind of revolve around this middle button, which is either you're choosing Storm, Earth, and Fire or Serenity. The builds are pretty much identical. You'll always take most of these talents. You know, you can interchangeably swap between Skyreach, Bone Dust Brew, and Furious Zuen. Any two combination of those three is going to do pretty similar output and damage, so it's really up to personal preference. A lot of the top monks right now are using Skyreach and Bone Dust Brew simply because it lines up better with cooldowns and there's not as much risk on dying on your cooldowns. But the first build we can do is we can just go ahead and take a look at the Bone Dust Mythic Plus build. Right here on this screen is pretty much the general build that you're going to want to run. I'll leave the import string in the description below for you guys. You guys can import that, check it out. But kind of just some quick highlights of this build. The left side of the tree or monk build over here is pretty much going to be generally the same for almost every single key. Depending on if it's tyrannical weeks or if you want a little bit more defensive, you can swap out some points. For example, I have like a better point inside this fortified brew, which kind of just gives me, better armor dodge chance, 25%, which is pretty good. However, you can swap that out if your group needs avoidance, which is probably the general preferred thing in higher keys. You could also kind of swap that out, and let's say you need detox in Agathar's Academy for the tree boss. If your healer kind of slacks or didn't spec into it, it's pretty helpful to have for your tank. But in general, this will stay the same for almost every single key, so I wouldn't be worried too much about this side. And then for the Bone Dust side of things, your talents are going to be pretty much the same. You're going to have your Mark of the Crane, your Dancer Chi-Ji proc. We also have the Enhanced Touch of Death on both sides, so your Todd's going to be doing a lot of damage. Obviously, we're taking Tiger, we're taking Invoker's Delight, which is the baseline legendary for Shadowlands. And for this build, I'm currently using Skyreach and Bone Dust Brew. Skyreach is pretty cool because you just get that first attack 50% critical strike chance, and it's also a pretty decent single target upgrade. If you're a little scared to use this, or like you just don't want to die on pulls because you're running into a swirly or something, you can just take Fury Zuen. It's going to be a similar damage output. Essentially what this does is every time that you do your mastery stacks, so this means that you're pressing a different button every single time, you're not overlapping your buttons, you'll get a 1% chance for your next Fist of Fury to give you 5% haste and also summon a Tiger for 8 seconds. So it's about half the duration of the normal Tiger, which is pretty cool. You don't really have to line up your cooldowns for this. If possible, try to line up your proc with your Bone Dust Brew. It's kind of a little advanced to do that, but if not, just do your normal rotation, just go through it, you'll get these extra procs throughout the dungeon, and it'll eventually equal out to your Skyreach damage. Anyways, that's kind of just the overview of the Bone Dust build. We're going to move over to the Serenity build, which is a tiny bit different. It's really just one button difference, to be honest with you. Your monk side of the tree is going to stay the same, except, depending on dungeon or affix. Then you're going to hop over here, and the only thing you're changing is Serenity. I like playing Bone Dust and Serenity in high tyrannical key and or multi-boss keys, so this would be like your Halls of Valor with 5 bosses. It does pretty good burst AoE damage, however your sustained or your consistent damage overall is a lot lower. You also run the risk of dying on your cooldowns with this build, so essentially you'll be useless for another 2 minutes afterwards. The one thing that kind of sucks with Serenity right now is it doesn't line up properly with Zuen or Bone Dust Brew because it's a minute and a half. So you're going to end up holding Serenity for an extra 30 seconds to line up with your Tiger almost every single time, in at least most circumstances. That's the only real crappy thing about this build. If you wanted to line up your Tiger and Serenity more often, you could drop Skyreach and get Zuen's Bond. Essentially, every time that you hit your combo strikes, you're not breaking your mastery stacks, it decreases the cooldown of your Tiger by like 0.1 seconds, which is pretty good. It kind of stacks up overall to be like a 20 to 25 second difference. So instead of holding your Serenity for 30 seconds, it'll be like a 5 to 10 second hold. I would say overall the Serenity build is a lot harder to learn. However, if you master it correctly, you don't die in your cooldowns, and you know what buttons to press at what times, then it might be slightly better than the Bone Dust build. There's a lot more risk versus reward for this build, which is why you see a lot of the top monks still playing the Bone Dust build with Storm, Earth, and Fire. Anyways, that's kind of the key differences for talents. At this point in the video, I'm probably going to stop recording and go record the actual ability priority and all that stuff, so let's just hop right into that. Okay, so we're hopping into the part of the video where we're going over ability priority and then opening rotation for your cooldowns. One thing to keep in mind is there's no set rotation for after you pop your cooldowns. You simply follow an ability priority. Means you have a list of spells. Click whichever one is at the top of the list. I'll show you guys a screenshot of that from the Peak of Serenity website real quick. As you can see, they're pretty much the same. If you look between these two numbers, it's only a 0.09% difference on Fortified, and then a 0.16 difference on Tyrannical. Serenity is simming slightly higher in Fortified and slightly lower on Tyrannical, and then vice versa for Storm, Earth, and Fire. So essentially, you play whatever you want out of these two builds I'm about to show you, and whichever you find easy, whatever is going to be safest. If you're just starting out, or you're just starting to push and get some IO and gear, Storm, Earth, and Fire is the way to go, in my opinion. That's what a lot of the top monks are using right now in Mythic Plus, and if we even go to Raider IO real quick, and we look at some of the top monks in the world. First page. We go look at Straw's build right now. Straw is using Storm, Earth, and Fire, Bone Dust, and Skyreach, which is kind of just the base build. Okay, so I kind of had to pull this up from a previous recording that I had. I tried recording this a couple days ago, and I just didn't like the way it turned out. Currently, the Peak of Serenity website is down because of website host issues. Regardless, I still have it saved in a video so we can go over it. You go to the website and you go to the PvE guide, scroll down to see the priority list for AoE and Serenity AoE. It also shows your single target rotations. I'm not going to go through those this video. Those aren't the two most concerning things. Based on the AoE ones, you guys can kind of reference, figure out the single target, and if not, you can just check out the website for that. So looking at this right now, there's a few things we can knock off automatically, according to our build. We don't use Feline Stomp at all, so you can knock off number 1. We can go to Whirling Dragon Punch, we can knock that off. We can knock off Rushing Jade Wind. We can knock off Feline Stomp and Cheat Wave. So essentially the main ones that we're going to be concerned about is number 2, 3, 4, Heart of 5, 7, 8, 9, and 11. The order of those numbers is the order of importance. So the ones at the top are going to be the ones that you want to use the most often. So for example, Strike the Windlord is a 45-second cooldown. You want to press this button as soon as possible every single time. If possible, line it up with your CDs. If not, use the button. That's part of your priority list. That's the number 1 thing you should be getting off every single time. And then the second most important thing, Spinning Crane Kick, but only with the cheat proc. And then followed by your Fist of Fury. Fist of Fury is kind of unique, depending on if you're in your normal rotation or if you're in burst. You might cancel Fist of Fury, also depending on key level, and if it's tyrannical or fortified, stuff like that, but we'll dive a little bit deeper into that in just a moment. The next important thing would be your Rising Sun Kick. Essentially what Rising Sun Kick does with our talents is whenever you RSK, it decreases the cooldown of your Fist of Fury by X amount of seconds. I believe this is... okay, yeah. So, the way this works is with Zuen's Battle Gear, is essentially every time you RSK, going to reduce the cooldown of Fist of Fury by 4 seconds whenever it crits. And then every time that you Fist of Fury and then you Rising Sun Kick, the damage is increased by 40%. At least the critical chance strike. And this kind of goes hand in hand with our tier set. If you look at our tier set right now, our 2 set is, after you Fist of Fury, it increases your next 2 RSKs or Spin Crane Kicks by 30% damage, which is kind of massive in AoE or single target. And then our 4 set enhances the next 3 Rising Sun Kicks or Spinning Crane Kicks, and also increases damage of your next Fist of Fury by 5%, stacking up to 3 times. Don't really have to keep track of the Fist of Fury damage too often. However, it is important after you Fist of Fury that you prioritize using Spinning Crane Kick. Obviously, after your RSK, it's going to be your normal Spinning Crane Kick, Blackout Kick. It says do not overcap Teaching of Monastery. Teaching of Monastery is every time you Tiger Palm, your Blackout Kick is going to strike an additional time, you'll get 3 stacks of this. So if you watch right here, boom, boom, boom. So you have 3 of these. If I decide to Tiger Palm again, it's just going to refresh that stack. So what it's saying is, never have 3 stacks of this. If you're at 3, you're going to want to press Blackout Kick. It'll remove the stacks, it does increase damage. It's always good to do at 3 stacks. It's kind of just a skill cap thing. It's not something you have to prioritize 100%, especially when you're starting out, but it's super good to know and understand how that works. Anyway, so that's the priority list for your normal AoE. Now your Serenity one is going to be completely different. This one's pretty easy to follow, actually. This is only during Serenity, first off. So after you use Serenity and Serenity is on cooldown, you're going to revert back to priority lists that we just saw. Essentially, Serenity builds have 2 priority lists, why it's a little bit harder and a higher skill cap for some people. The way Serenity works is you hit Fist of Fury just to trigger the tier set, and then you cancel it. You immediately cancel it, spinning crane kick, you blackout kick, you spinning crane kick, and then you get your 2 uses of your tier set damage amp, plus you have the damage amp from Serenity, so you're going to be doing massive damage. After your tier set bonus is up, Fist of Fury again, cancel, crane kick, blackout kick, spinning crane kick, Fist of Fury. And then you just follow that to 1 second and you full channel. And then obviously once Serenity is up and you're done full channeling, you're just going to swap back over to the priority list for the AoE target that we just previously mentioned. Okay, so since the website is down and my recording actually didn't show the opener, I was able to pull these off of Wowhead guide, which I believe was literally just updated a little bit ago. Yeah, 8 days ago, so this should be updated and accurate. First off, we're going to start with the Storm, Earth, and Fire AoE opener. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to do the rotation in full speed, and then once we're done with that, we'll go back, we'll analyze it, we'll slow it down just to make sure everyone understands the buttons they need to press in the opening rotation. Just to keep in mind, once you're done with the opening rotation, you just follow the priority list. There's no set rotation afterwards. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the rotation now. Okay, for the most part, I think that was a pretty much flawless run of how the AoE opening rotation is supposed to look like. I also included the next 20 to 30 seconds after, just so you guys could see the priority rotation. Not the priority rotation, kind of just the priority list in motion. With this build, you should peak around 300 to 320k once you're fully geared with best in slot. It might even be a little bit higher. I think I could have played that a little bit more smoothly, but overall, it was pretty much how it's supposed to look. So I'm just going to do a quick little deep dive into why I pressed the buttons and the way that they're pressed. Essentially, the reason you expel harm and you chi burst the pack before you go in is you gain that chi. So before you even start attacking the pack, you'll have at least 2 from expel harm, and then you'll have 2 from your chi burst, which is going to add up to 4, and then you'll have, you know, enough chi to go through your rotation without having to press Tiger Palm an excessive amount of times. And then the first thing you drop is Tiger. The reason you drop Tiger statues so early is because it's a 30-second duration, so you want to make sure you have it for the entire duration of the pack, not just the, the 20 seconds that the pack is alive. And then you'll press your Zuen, you'll Bone Dust, you'll press your Storm, Earth, and Fire, you'll Tiger Palm to spread your Mark of the Crane stacks out to the targets, Fist of the Windlord because that's obviously top of priority, it'll do the most damage. You'll Fist of Fury with your saved up Chi, you're gonna full channel it, and then you'll Tiger Palm again, and then the next two things under it, the Rising Sun Kick with a Whirling Dragon Punch, and then Whirling Dragon Punch can be ignored because we don't take that talent, and then you essentially just follow the priority of spinning, and rotating your spin, your Strike of the Windlord, Blackout Kick, make sure you're Tiger Palming for Chi and all that good stuff. Overall, it's not too hard to follow, it's pretty simple. Once you kind of memorize the buttons in your head, you just follow it literally every single time without deviation. There are some instances where you will cancel your Fist of Fury and kind of just expedite your rotation depending on key level and how long mobs survive and what your tank's pulling and stuff like that. In general, I'd say if you're below a key level of 20, I would cancel Fist of Fury in all AoE situations, at least during your opener. Obviously, when you're doing your full you're just rotating through your priority list, you're not going to want to cancel Fist of Fury. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Storm, Earth, and Fire build. If you have any questions for that rotation or that priority list, just leave a comment down below and I'll be able to assist you. Alright, so similar to what I just did for the Storm, Earth, and Fire rotation and the priority list, what I'm going to do for the Serenity one is the exact same. I'm just going to do a full run through, no audio. You guys will just watch it for like 30 to 45 seconds. And then after that, I'll kind of commentate and give my thoughts, kind of explain some things and why they happen like that. Anyways, guys, let's get right into the rotation here. Okay, so that one went pretty smooth. I think I did everything in the correct order. I think I might have accidentally procced a Spinning Crane kick before using my Strike of the Windlord. It's just a small error, but I think at the end of the day, I think using the proc would have been a little bit more damage over the Strike of the Windlord. But regardless of that, let's just do a little bit of a deeper dive into the actual opening rotation and then the priority. So essentially, same as Storm, Earth, and Fire, you start off with your Expel Harm and then your Chi Burst, so you get that 4 Chi right off the bat. You're going to put your statue down so you get the most throughput and value of it. And then for this one, you're going to Tiger Palm one mob and Blackout Kick the other. At that point, you'll either be at 3 or 4 stacks. If you're at 3, it's not too big of a damage loss. I just went ahead and popped my Zuen, my Bone Dust Brew, and then I full channeled my Fist of Fury. Once I had that, I Tiger Palmed and Blackout Kicked again. I used Serenity, and then I ended up using my proc instead of Strike of the Windlord. In an ideal situation, you would Strike of the Windlord and then start spinning afterwards. It's not too much of a loss, but I guess you're losing a second or two on your cooldown of Strike of the Windlord and going into the next pack and stuff like that. But after that, you kind of just follow the priority that we went through earlier. The priority of... You're essentially just Using Fist of Fury to get your tier set bonus, instant canceling, spinning, Blackout Kick for the damage. Since Blackout Kick does AoE damage now with our talent build, that's the filler button so we don't break our mastery. And then you'll Spinning Crane kick your second stack. Once your tier stacks are gone, you Fist of Fury once again, cancel, spin, Blackout Kick, spin, fist. And then at that point, once you're near 1 to 2 seconds left of Serenity, you're going to use Fist of Fury and just let it full channel. And then once that's done, you just go back to your normal base rotation, or not your base rotation, your base priority list that we went over earlier for Storm, Earth, and Fire. The Serenity build's a little bit more complex since you actually have to incorporate 2 priority lists, and then, you know, that's a lot to handle at a certain point for some people. So overall, not too bad. If you guys have any questions for this one, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to help and answer as best as I can. Anyways, guys, let's move on to the rest of the guide where we just go through our gear, you know, gems, trinkets, all that good stuff. So let's hop into that. Okay, so at this point, I believe I've went over the changes to WindWalker Monks and Shadowlands, the 2 builds that most people are running, the ability priorities, and the rotations for your burst. Now we're going to hop into kind of the tinier things about Monk, things that a lot of people have questions on. So the first thing that we're going to hop into is just in general your gear that you want, stat priorities, and all that stuff. Before I hop into this section, I just want to preface that simming your character is always the best choice. There's no hard stat lines that you need to hit. There's no, you know, hard trinkets that you need to get. There are some stuff that's like advised, but overall, sim your character every single time when you're doing changes. Okay, so let's hop right into this. As you can see, I currently have 33% crit, 29% mastery, and 17 verse. You use verse pot, that'll put you up to 21%. And then our haste is pretty low at 4%. The stat priority kind of ranges. I would say crit and versatility are pretty much equal to each other in terms of simming, followed by mastery, and then followed far behind by haste. This doesn't mean you want to have 0% haste, but you also don't want above like 7 or 8% haste. This is simply because we take Invoker's Delight, which gives us 33% haste whenever we use Tiger. So any additional haste on top of that kind of DRs past a certain point and isn't really worth it for us. In terms of gear, you're going to want to make the Flaring Cowl. Essentially, this does AoE pulsing fire damage, and this is going to pair really nicely with the Aeronog ring that drops off the first boss in the raid. If I go ahead and check this out on Mythic, every time you deal fire damage, it also burns them for an additional 7,000 damage over 2 seconds. Now, monks don't have natural fire damage, which kind of makes that equip useless for us. However, when we pair it together with the Flaring Cowl, it does around 1 to 2% of our overall damage and keys, which is a pretty steady increase. Not to mention, the ring also has Mega Verse and Mega Crit, which is our best in slot stats. So that'll be your first embellishment that you're going to put on your gear, and then the second one is obviously going to be your Elemental Lariat. You're going to put Crit and Verse in this most likely. And then the embellishment for this is probably going to be the default one that comes with the Lariat, but if it doesn't, the one that you want is when your spells and abilities have a chance to empower one of your socketed gems, increasing main stat by 551. Overall, that's just like an insane buff. There's also a WeakAuras that tracks whenever this procs, which I'm also going to share at the end of the video for you guys. And then obviously, since your Flaring Cowl's on your head, your tier pieces are going to go in your shoulders, your chest, your hands, and then your legs. I believe the default sparks that everybody gets now at max level is 5. So those will be your 2 main embellishment crafted pieces here, and then you can use your sparks on pretty much anything that you need. I recommend going for a ring because you can kind of target your secondary stats pretty well and you get a socket. I also recommend going for bracers because you can get that battle res, which is pretty valuable for groups. Most of the times when you're invited to keys as a monk, you're either going to be playing with a Resto Druid or an Evoker Healer. If you're playing with an Evoker Healer, 9 times out of 10, your group will not have a natural B-res at all, so it's great to have these just in case. And then I would say your 5th spark should probably go towards a weapon. If not, both your 4th and 5th sparks. depending on your luck. If you have really bad weapons, I would definitely invest. And then in terms of trinkets, it's always wise to sim. Simming is always the best option. If in a perfect world, if I was able to choose my trinkets, I would do some combination of Grief Torch and Boon and or Whetstone. Whetstone kind of just lines up perfectly with your Tiger. It's free damage, it's good on single target and AoE. It gives you good secondary stat. Mastery is pretty good for us. Since this is a dungeon drop, it's easily targetable. You can easily go farm this in Court of Stars. Court of Stars is a super fast chill key. If you're not a raider and you just do Mythic Plus, I would definitely advise you go do this. If you do raid, the 2 trinkets that you want to keep an eye out, drop off Dathia. This will be Storm Eater's Boon. One thing about Storm Eater's Boon, however, is whenever you use it, you have to stand still for, I think it's like 10 seconds. You can't move at all. Obviously, that's super risky, especially in keys with swirlies and all that, so if you're going to run Boon, you have to pay attention to when you use it. The other one that I would use over my current trinket would be Grief Torch. Grief Torch is, once again, a 2-minute cooldown. It's pretty much an AoE and a good target use. Then I would say your 4th best trinket is Hunger of the Pack, which drops in Halls of Valor. This is pretty much a stat stick. You get Agi, you get crit. Then again, those are just my recommendations. Always sim your gear. Always sim your stats, your talents. Going off word of mouth is one thing, but simming your gear is a whole nother ballpark. But yeah, that kind of wraps it up for the gearing section at least. If you can mythic raid, hop in it, get some gear. The first like 4 or 5 bosses of the mythic raid are a complete joke. Almost any guild by the end of this tier or in the coming weeks will have those down. So hop in, get some free 415, 421 gear. I kind of mentioned this when I was going through the gear, but one-handers are definitely a lot more preferred than two-handers. For the most part, at 421, they sim 3% higher over a two-hander, and that's simply because of stat scaling and attack speed. As the expansion progresses, two-handers become more dominant. I think they suspected that in the 3rd raid tier, so I believe that would be 10.2, two-handers will start to overtake one-handers. And this happens pretty much every expansion. For some reason, Blizzard's scaling is really weird with these weapons. I think it's been like this for Monk for at least the last 3 or 4 expansions. The other thing I like to highlight is your gems. The best thing to do is always sim. Like I said earlier, sim your gems, but in general, crit and verse gems, you can't go wrong with those. You get that critical strike chance, and you get that verse, which is damage increase and damage taken reduction, which is always great. And then as far as your enchants, your cloak, you're always going to want to get graceful avoidance. Avoidance is always really good. Waking stats for your primary stat on your chest, and then you're going to want the fierce armor kit on your legs. I think that's just a main stat increase and a stamina increase. Your feet is Watcher's Loam. I believe that's a flat agility increase if I'm not mistaken. Things, depending on how your sims go, then whatever it says to do. Right now my sims are saying do 1 crit and 1 versatility, so that's what I currently have. However, next week it could completely change and I could be on double verse or double crit. Always sim. Your bracers, 200 avoidance is always good. That's like a 2 or 3%. Plus you have that 4% from your talent. And then for your weapons, currently Sophic Devotion is simming the highest for both your main hand and your offhand. I have seen some sims for some other people where the Frozen Devotion is actually simming higher for people's offhand. Again, it's just a sim thing. Go sim it, see what you need. If you don't have 421 or 418 weapons, don't waste your money on a 3-star enchant. Just buy the 2-star enchant. It's not that big of a difference and you're saving a lot of gold. And then in terms of race, you can be whatever you want. I think Orc sims slightly higher than all the other races because of the attack power that you get from the racial, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I know a lot of people play Dwarf for bursting and stuff like that in Shadowlands. That might be the same for this expansion, just not sure yet. Night Elf is pretty good because of Meld, good in like Halls of Valor and stuff like that. Then obviously Blood Elf is good for Arcane Torrent. You get that Purge, which is really good in like Life Pool at the end of the dungeon. Honestly, it's just down to what you want to play. I'm Troll right now for some reason. Couldn't tell you why, but I get a little bit of a haste increase, so I get extra procs here and there, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. In terms of your consumables, you're going to be using Buzzing Rune on both your main hand and your offhand. These sims slightly higher for me. It might be the same for you as well. Just check out the sim. I believe you can sim consumables. I believe there is an option on RaidBots that allows you to do that. But in general, you're going to be Buzzing Rune. For your potion, Tepid Versatility is the go-to. It might not sim higher than the other potions. However, having that extra 3 or 4% versatility to take less damage is always worth it, in my opinion. A lot of the other top monks who push, world first key using this. I'm using this in my lower 22, 23, 24 range. It's definitely worth using. Okay, so the food that you want is the Faded Fortune Cookie. This is just a flat main stat. It's pretty expensive right now. I think it's like 80 gold each on the auction house. If you're dying a lot and your group's not dropping Feast, you don't necessarily need to do this. You can just go out and get the crit food, which is what I have on the side. It's just the Fillet of Fangs, which is 105 critical strike, which I think is like maybe 1%, maybe 2% max increase. And then in terms of using potions during the dungeon, you have Shocking Disclosure, which is your big AoE one. This is good for like Agathar's Academy or pretty much any fort week. Essentially, this puts a static field around your character and you just do damage over time every 5 seconds, 30 seconds. And then the other one is the Elemental Potion of Power. You can buy these off the auction house, or you can have an alchemist make them. Work order post. The work order ones give you maybe 100 or 200 more main stat, which is pretty good. It's also kind of hard if you don't know alchemy. These are pretty good for Tyran weeks, single target, and even if you can't afford Shocking Disclosure, which they're normally cheaper, then use Potions of Power. The new Invis pot is the Potion of the Hush Cipher, and this does share a cooldown. Potion of Power and your Shocking Disclosure, they're all in a 5-minute E. So if you do use a battle pot and then you need to invis after, you're going to be screwed. So just pay attention to your tank's route, make sure you have invis when needed. Most groups will have a rogue in them, so you won't have to worry about this at all. Then the absolute last thing for your character are your professions. These don't really matter, I'm gonna be honest with you. The only thing that professions really matter in for dungeons is Court of Stars. There's a few buffs you can pick up around the map in the second part, which are tied between class and then your profession as well. Also, if you're alchemy on the first boss, you can use Poison Vial, and you can poison the boss to die instantly at 25%, which is pretty cool. This can also be done by rogues, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. You're going to be doing keys with rogues 90% of the time. Alright, so outside that, we've gone over introduction, gone over the changes to the monk compared to last expansion, went over the 2 talent builds, the ability priority, single target rotation, AoE rotation, all that good stuff. We went over our character stats, embellishments, one-hander versus two-hander, trinkets, gear, gems, enchants, racials, consumables, and professions. Now we're going to dive into more of the UI type of thing. Now my UI it's not the cleanest, I will admit. However, it gets the job done. We can go through my add-ons right here. So I have a lot of add-ons that I've downloaded but I don't use currently. The first thing that I use is obviously make sure you get the plugins that come with it and you enable them. Essentially, these plugins kind of just enhance your other add-ons. The one thing that I use is the streamer plugin, which allows you to show your cast bar and the abilities that you use down here in order, so it'll help you not break your mastery stacks, which is really useful. I will also give you guys an export import option for each of my add-ons. I think I can export my details profile, my Dominos profile, my ElvUI profile. Next thing that I use is Dominos. Essentially, I have 3 main bars at the very bottom that'll show everything. I think Dominos comes with its own cast bar, which I have directly above here in between the two. Then I also have a bar on the side for my consumables and my mount. The next thing I have is Method Raid Tools. Method Raid Tools just kind of shows an overarching list of cooldowns for everyone in your group. Go over to your raid cooldowns. You can actually track the cooldowns for every single class, and they'll show up here on the side. Okay, so I can actually export this profile, so I'll make a profile, and I'll give you guys the link for that in the description. And then obviously I have Mythic Dungeon Tools. This is for, you know, looking at routes, everything like that. I don't really have any preset routes. Obviously I'm not a tank. Your tank should be the one responsible for all these routes and everything. The next things that I have are Omni CC and Omni CD. Omni CD is kind of the important one. Whenever you invite somebody to a group, their cooldowns are going to show on the right side. Hopefully. There we go. Yep. So you can kind of customize cooldowns you want to show and everything like that. Also, shout out to Helms for being my test dummy for this. Next thing I have is pre-made groups filter. Essentially, this will help you narrow down your list when you're in Group Finder looking for something. It'll show up as PGF. You can kind of track, let's say I only want to play with 2,400 players or higher. It'll only give you those results. And then obviously Raider.io for the score. I have rating, the Mythic Plus and the recruitment one on. RC loot consoles for raid, you can ignore that. Simulation craft is pretty important. This is how you're going to export your sims to RaidBots and actually sim your character. I'm not going to do a full-on video on how to sim your character. There's plenty of videos out there. I'll probably leave a link in the description below so you guys can check out how to actually sim your character. But essentially what you'll do is you'll download the add-on. It'll automatically make a long script for you. You'll copy. You'll open up your Google Chrome.com/simbot/top gear. This screen will show up. Pretty much just highlight everything in here, paste, and then down here you'll show all your gear in your inventory, your bags. It'll even show items in your vault too if you haven't gotten anything from your vault. You can sim different enchants, everything like that, different talent builds, you know, the style of the fighting style. So if you want to do single target, you do patchwork. If you want to do dungeons, use dungeon slice. Nothing too crazy. Last major thing outside ElvUI is your WeakAuras. I'm going to give you guys some of the WeakAuras. Let's just go through real quick and see what we have right now. I have a lot of WeakAuras that are kind of useless at the moment, but some of them kind of pertain to Mythic Plus. So I'll give you guys the Battle Res tracker. I have this sitting down here. I think I have a Details one and a Boss mod. They're kind of just additional things that pop up. Dungeon Raider.io and class is super useful in your finder. It'll kind of highlight the IO of the players in the group, what classes are in the group, stuff like that. ERT timers is pretty good for raid. The PI one's pretty good if you're playing with a priest. And then I use a chi tracker right below my bar so I can track my chi better compared to looking top left. Outside that, the interrupt tracker is probably a main one that I use. And then the rest of these loaded in right now are kind of for raid, I believe. I have the Thundering Mythic Plus affix tracker, which I'll give you guys that as well. And then the last two things, ElvUI and DBM. I'll give you an export my ElvUI profile. I also use Lucky One UI. This is kind of just an additional add-in to ElvUI. I still have my imports from my previous guide. However, I think I did change a few things, so I'll tweak them and I'll, you know, give you the links and everything for that. Alright, so I think the last thing we have to do is look at our macros. I have a lot of macros here. A lot of these are useless, but nonetheless, let's take a look. I have a Bone Dust Brew, which is just a cast at cursor macro. So essentially when I press my button, my brew will go to wherever my cursor is. That's super helpful. It eliminates an additional step. So instead of having to click the button and then click where you want to drop it, it just goes there instantly. Saves you a little bit of time. You can do other things around, stuff like that. Another one that's pretty useful is Chi Wave Chi Burst. Essentially, this will take a look at your talents. If you have Chi Wave, it'll show your Chi Wave. If you don't have Chi Wave, it'll show Burst. This is if you're swapping between your single target Raid spec and your Mythic Plus spec. I also have a normal kick and then a focus kick. I don't actually have my focus kick on my bar at the moment because I haven't ran into a situation where I need it. But essentially the ideal thing with this is you have a button on your keyboard that sets your focus. Like, let's say I would do like L, for example. Whenever I click a target and I press L, it would set a focus. And then I would also have a key binding for focus kick, so I could start targeting other mobs, hit the prio target, and then just press the kick button. It'll kick the focus target. At the moment, I don't have that set up, but I could see situations where in lower keys that's pretty useful, especially if you're playing with a group without comms, or you're playing with a group that just doesn't interrupt. And then the other one I have is the Storm, Earth, and Fire macro. This just does the exact same thing as the last one. If you have Storm, Earth, and Fire, it'll show it. If you don't, it'll show Serenity. And then I have a statue macro, same situation as Bone Dust Brew. It'll cast at your mouse location. Anyways, guys, that's going to conclude the WindWalker 10.0.5 Mythic Plus guide. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I've been working on this for a couple weeks now. I was working on it before the 0.05 patch, and then I pushed it back a little bit because I didn't know if anything was going to change or not. And they ended up only fixing some things for single targets, so that doesn't really concern us here today. But countless hours went into this video. If you guys could please subscribe. We're almost on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and also drop a like. If you guys have any questions, any comments, any feedback, or if you guys think anything could be improved on, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Let me know how I did. I'm really curious to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions. And also, if you need help with anything, just leave a comment down below. You know, hopefully between myself and a few others in the community, we can answer your questions and get anything solved that you guys might have an issue on. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me. My voice hurts after commentating over all of this, but I'll see you guys in the next video. I've timed a few 23 keys. This tyrannical week that we're in right now seems pretty good, so we might have some 24s on the horizon. If I do, I'll make sure to share them and post them on the channel. And until then, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.